What's up, y'all? We are heading into week 12 of the NFL season. That means we get the amazing 3-game slate on Thanksgiving. You might be getting ready by getting the turkey thawed out. Maybe you've already started on your pecan pie. Not me. I've been in the utilization bunker looking at routes and all of that sort of data to get you ready to dominate on Thursday. We have got 3 players that will be loosening their belts for the feast because their roles are expanding. The first player we're going to talk about is Tony Pollard, who exploded for the RB1 overall finish with 37 fantasy points despite the return of Ezekiel Elliott. And guess what? There's reason to believe that this production could continue. Let's start by looking at Pollard's utilization in the games before Zeke's injury, and then let's compare it to this last game when Zeke returned. The biggest change is his route participation. It went from 35% earlier this season to 59% in this last game with Zeke. That's a 24 percentage point bump. We also saw his targets per route run double, went from 16% to 32%. If Pollard hangs around in that range on both of those numbers, he's going to be in absolutely elite territory with guys like CMC and Alvin Kamara the rest of the way. We also saw 32% of the 2-minute offense go to Pollard before. Now he's getting 100%. So in summary, giving Pollard more opportunity in the run game really gives the Cowboys a chance to also keep Ezekiel Elliott involved. He can still handle up to half of the rushing attempts. In fact, going back to 2011, we can look at running backs that didn't get to 50% of rushing attempts for a player like Pollard, but has the receiving data points that we talked about earlier. They average 16.3 PPR points per game. So that makes Pollard a mid-range RB2 the rest of the way, but he also still carries RB1 upside and makes him an absolute smash on Turkey Day. The second player we're going to talk about is TJ Hawkinson of the Minnesota Vikings. He comes over from the Detroit Lions, and Hawkinson was really struggling. He was battling with Amon-Ra St. Brown for all the same targets, those underneath the defense and the middle of the field kind of looks. Now he's come over to Minnesota, and despite still dealing with another target hog known as Justin Jefferson, he is actually really come into his own. And a lot of that has to do with Jefferson works outside. Jefferson works deeper down the field. So let's take a look at Hawkinson's utilization. Since the trade, Hawkinson has been on the field for 83% of the routes in Minnesota. Not a big change from Detroit, 79%. However, his target share has gone through the roof. 15% in games with Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit, 26% target share in Minnesota, despite Justin Jefferson also still having big games, a 17% targets per route run versus 25% in Minnesota. Historically speaking, we've only seen 26 tight ends since 2011 do what Hawkinson is doing this year, which is posting an 80% plus route participation, along with a 22% plus targets per route run. Guess what? 17 of those have finished in the top 3 on the season, and they've averaged 15.1 PPR points per game. The last player we're going to talk about is Darius Slayton for the New York Giants. I have to tell you guys, I was reluctant putting Slayton on the list this week because historically he's not been a target earner. His career high is 17% targets per route run. That is usually not a good sign. However, I just couldn't ignore the fact that Slayton has been very consistent over the last 6 weeks. Since week 5, Slayton has a 22% target share for the Giants. He also has a 2.48 yards per route run. That is wide receiver 1 worthy if we go back and look at historical context for fantasy football. And he has 4 top 24 finishes in that period. And that's not all. There's actually an opportunity for Slayton's utilization to expand even more. We have Wan'Dale Robinson suffering a knee injury last weekend. He is going to be out for the season. That was his primary competition for targets. If we look at the Giants, outside of Wan'Dale Robinson, the next closest player is Richie James Jr., and he's questionable for this week. He didn't practice on Tuesday, got in a limited session on Wednesday. He only has a 17% targets per route run. Slayton saw a season-high 87% route participation last weekend, and guess what? It was his best game moving all over the field. He had 48% of his routes come from the slot. So in summary, with Slayton, we have a player that's already been performing well over the last several weeks. We now have an injury that can open up additional opportunity, and the team is starting to move him around. If he gets an opportunity to play full-time and he's getting schemed up in the slot, There's a real chance you could be dealing with a wide receiver 3 for the rest of the season. And honestly, he's probably due for a blow up game, making him a great player to think about on Thanksgiving Day.